Okay, this is part two of chapter 15, environmental dispute resolution. And the last slide was 15 minutes, so I'll just make this a couple of slides, make it a bit shorter. So these two slides are going to be about Superfund dispute resolution. So CERCLA, as I described in the last slide, was set up to clean up hazardous waste sites with Superfund legislation. And the policy here is that the polluter pays the policy. And there are various standards, the first being strict liability standard. And under this standard, a party can be held liable whether or not it was negligent. For example, a firm can be responsible for cleaning up a hazardous dump site even if the firm's disposal practices were legal. Joint and several liability standard means that those contributing to the hazards of a dump site can be sued individually or collectively for the cleanup costs. Now, unlike a negligence standard, this requires the plaintiffs to demonstrate that defendants were negligent in their actions. Strict liability typically simplifies the litigation process. So, depending upon these standards, is a big consideration as to who is going to pay for the Superfund cleanup site. Now, what makes Superfund dispute resolution complicated is there's a large number of sites, enormity of the associated cleanup expenses. It tends to irk everyone involved. Lawyers except some lawyers on the receiving end. Superfund legislation can take a very, very long time, and oftentimes there's no clear resolution of the Superfund site or the hazardous materials within the site. The EPA spends more than $200 million a year on its own legal staff, and the Superfunds is the largest single project. Total legal costs are around $10 billion, and about $15 billion in private spending has gone to site cleanups. There are 804 sites cleaned up in the first 21 years of the Superfund cleanup. So environmental dispute resolution is going to be of great importance for some time. Now our next slide is where I happened to be in fall of 2017. This was a place called Butte, Montana, very, very famous for copper mining and aluminum and silver mining, but it left behind lots of hazardous materials. And this indeed was a Superfund site at one time in the late 19th and early 20th century. Butte, Montana was the largest producer of I think it may have even have been aluminum and especially copper and materials that sped in U.S. industrial revolution. But it became a Superfund site, and the picture to your left is some remains of the mine. It's all over Butte, Montana, and the picture to the right is a lake. Is actually a pit, a mining pit, and that liquid that you see there is actually highly toxic, and that liquid is called the Berkeley pit. So this was a Superfund site, and the mining companies had to pay an enormous amount of money to clean up the site. One of the things they did was they put in a bicycle path around the mines itself that are above Butte, Montana. So quite a complicated affair. Butte is still very much a functioning town, but it is also indeed a Superfund site. Okay, and this is going to end part 2 of this chapter.